Dublin, 1700. The night was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comforts you, but the kind that presses against your chest. The kind that makes you feel like something's coming. By the river Liffey, the harbor guards leaned into the cold, lanterns flickering in the fog. Then, they saw it. A ship. Black sails, weather-beaten wood. No flags, no warnings. Just drifting in, silent, steady, and impossible. Because 5 years ago, that ship, the Ouzel Galley, had vanished without a trace, declared lost, mourned, paid out in full. And now, here it was, crawling back into port like a ghost that never died. But the real fear didn't come from the ship, it came from the men on board. The Ouzel Galley was built for long journeys and dangerous waters. She was a stout merchant ship, broad-beamed and heavily rigged, designed to carry spices and silks between Ireland and the ports of the eastern Mediterranean. Her captain, Captain Massey, was no ordinary sailor. He was a seasoned mariner, Irish-born, Protestant-raised, but respected in Dublin by Catholics and merchants alike. In the summer of 1695, Massey was preparing for one of the galley's most ambitious voyages yet, trading Irish woolens and salted beef for exotic goods from Smyrna, in what is now modern-day Turkey. It wasn't just trade, it was opportunity. A single round trip could make a man wealthy for life. The docks were busy that morning. Crates of linen and barrels of smoked meat were rolled aboard. Crewmen joked and bickered in thick Cork accents. Massey walked among them with a quiet authority, inspecting the manifest, nodding to port inspectors, watching the ropes tighten against the tide. Among the crowd was a young boy, no older than 13, watching with wide eyes from behind a stack of crates. He was barefoot, covered in soot, and had no reason to be there, except curiosity. Massey caught sight of him and, instead of yelling, simply gave a slow nod. The boy blinked. That was Massey, stern but fair. By noon, the ship was ready. The crew lined up, 50 men, including carpenters, gunners, a ship's cook, and 2 armed guards. Massey addressed them briefly, not with speeches, but instructions. Wind was right, tides were shifting. It was time. As the ropes fell and sails were drawn, the Ouzel Galley pulled away from the Dublin harbor. Merchants waved, children shouted. The ship slipped into the Irish Sea, bound for adventure. And then, silence. For months, nothing came back. No letters, no sightings, no news. 6 months passed, then a year, then 2. By the 3rd year, the families had given up hope. Dublin's merchants filed their claims. Insurance was paid. Captain Massey was mourned in sermons. And the Ouzel Galley became another ghost of the sea. But not everyone believed she was gone. Some said she had been captured by Barbary pirates off the coast of Morocco. Others whispered darker theories, that the ship had turned pirate herself and that Massey had betrayed the merchants who trusted him. Still, with no proof and no survivors, the matter was closed. Until one cold night in 1700, the impossible happened. The ghost came home. It was just past midnight when the lookout at Ringsend saw the ship. At first, he thought it a trick of the fog, a shadow moving where there shouldn't be one. But as it drew closer, the outline became unmistakable. He recognized the shape of the hull, the peculiar angle of the mainmast. It was the Ouzel Galley, no question. He stumbled backward, dropped his lantern, and ran for the harbor bell. Within minutes, Dublin was awake. Church bells rang. Merchants rushed from their beds. The docks filled with shouting voices, flickering torches, and whispers that sounded more like prayers than conversation. The ship drifted in with an eerie calm, no signal from the crew, no shouts, no commands, just a soft creaking of timber and the slap of water against its bow. When she finally docked, the ropes were thrown without a word. A gangplank was lowered, and slowly, one by one, the crew appeared. They were thin, sun-blackened, silent. Their eyes were hollow, like men who had seen something that refused to let them sleep. Some limped, others winced at every sound. Not one of them smiled. Captain Massey stepped off last. He looked older, harder. He carried a small wooden box in one hand and a pistol in the other. He didn't speak, just looked at the gathered crowd with an expression that said, "Don't ask me anything I'm not ready to answer." The harbor master tried to greet him, but Massey pushed past. He walked straight toward the Merchant Guild Hall, a building lit by lanterns and guarded like a fortress. Inside that box, it was said, were the ship's logs, proof of every port they'd visited, every deal made, every loss suffered. But the box was never opened in public. The crew was taken in and questioned, but their stories didn't match. One said they were captured by Algerian corsairs and sold into slavery. Another claimed they joined a pirate fleet near the Canary Islands. A third spoke of a hidden island where they waited out the years, trading in secret. Nothing added up. The Merchant Guild wanted answers. The insurers demanded repayment. The public? They didn't know what to believe. What was clear was this: the Uzel galley was back, the crew was alive, and the truth was still buried somewhere out there, drifting between fact and fiction. Within days, a special inquiry was called. It wasn't a courtroom, not officially, but the guild hall turned into one. Benches filled with city leaders, merchants, and insurers. The crowd overflowed into the streets. Everyone wanted to hear what happened on that ship. Captain Massey stood at the center of it all. Tall, calm, unreadable. When asked for his version of the story, he laid it out like clockwork. Algerian corsairs had intercepted the galley near the Straits of Gibraltar. They were captured, taken to North Africa, and enslaved. After years of forced labor, Massey claimed they escaped, stole a ship, and made their way back to Dublin, returning with the original galley and a handful of goods they'd managed to reclaim. It was a compelling story, almost too compelling. The problem? His first mate Brannigan told a different story. He said they had never been taken to North Africa. According to him, they had turned toward the Caribbean, seeking better trade opportunities, and had fallen in with privateers operating under false Dutch papers. They spent years sailing under different flags, making dangerous trades, and keeping just ahead of the law. A third man, McNally, the ship's carpenter, claimed neither version was true. He believed Massey had struck a deal with pirates, that the Uzel galley became a smuggling vessel, evading tariffs and taxes, and that they were hiding more gold than anyone had seen. The tribunal was stunned. If any of it was true, the crew were no longer victims. They were criminals. Insurers demanded the return of all paid settlements. Merchants demanded restitution. The public? They just wanted the truth. But the truth was tangled. Evidence was scarce. Witnesses contradicted each other, and every time someone pressed Massey, he simply said, "What we did to survive." No formal charges were filed. The inquiry collapsed under the weight of uncertainty, and the crew was released. Still, Dublin was never the same. The tribunal faded into silence, but the city of Dublin couldn't let go of the questions. Taverns rang with theories. Street sermons warned of divine punishment. School children whispered tales of cursed gold and mutinous betrayal. Massey disappeared from public life. Some claimed he went to sea again. Others said he bought land in the West and lived in solitude. A few believed he never really returned, that the man who walked off that ship was someone else entirely. But it wasn't just Massey who slipped into shadow. The whole crew scattered. Brannigan was seen briefly in Liverpool, drunk and ranting about treasure maps. McNally vanished after a failed barroom duel in Cork. None of them stayed still. None of them talked again. Meanwhile, the ship, yes, the Uzel galley, was dry docked, inspected, and found to be seaworthy. Yet no merchant would sail her, no crew would board her. She became a relic, tied up at the far edge of the harbor, the subject of pointing fingers and muttered warnings. A few years later, a private society was formed, the Uzel Galley Society. Its original purpose? To settle merchant disputes quietly, an ironic tribute to a ship whose entire story was a dispute. Over time, the society became part of Dublin's civic culture, with members drawn from the city, most respected circles. The ship itself? Eventually dismantled, but not burned. Her wood was reused in the paneling of a city hall meeting chamber. Locals joked you could hear the creaking of her hull during long debates. Books were written. Stories were spun. songs sung. But no one ever knew the full truth.